Grant McCade heard a ragged breath coming from the bushes. He quickly pulled back on the reins. His hand tightened around the grip of his rifle, just in case it was a wolf or bandits. Quietly, he moved closer. Beneath the shade of a mesquite tree, 3 young Apache girls were curled up on the dry ground. Their lips were cracked, and their faces were caked with dust. The oldest, around 12 years old, was trying to shield the 2 younger ones with her thin, fragile arms. She held the youngest child tightly in her lap, while the other girl trembled uncontrollably from exhaustion. As Grant stepped closer, the oldest girl tried to stand, holding out a small stone knife to protect her sisters. But the knife slipped from her hand before she could even steady herself. Grant knelt down. Without saying a word, he took out his last piece of bread and his canteen of water, placing them gently in front of the children. The oldest girl looked up at him, her deep black eyes shining with something more than gratitude, trust. She placed her small hand on his chest, as if to carve that moment into her heart. "Thank you. One day, we will meet again." Grant gave a faint smile. To him, it was nothing more than the harmless words of a child. He put his hat back on and turned to walk away into the desert. 18 years had blown by like dust in the wind, leaving no mercy behind. Arizona was just as harsh as ever, only Grant McCade had changed. From a strong cowboy in his 20s, he was now a 30-year-old man, thin and sickly. The merciless sickness in his lungs made every breath feel like a knife cutting inside him. The doctor had told him, "There is not much time left, Grant." His once prosperous ranch was now nothing but wind howling through rotted fences, loose doors banging, and a roof so broken that the cold night air could reach straight into the bone. Cattle dying one after another in the drought. Friends gone. None willing to help him. To put it right, Grant had no one left. Every day, he lay on his creaking bed staring at the cracked ceiling, with nothing but memories to keep him company. Sometimes, he would pull out the old cloth he had tied behind his saddle all those years ago, the cloth he once used to wipe the tears of those 3 Apache girls. A childish promise fading like smoke, and Grant had lived long enough to believe they would never return. One late afternoon, Grant stepped onto the porch to gather the few pieces of firewood he had left. A sudden wave of coughing crushed his lungs. He fell to his knees, dark red blood dripping onto the dirt. Maybe this is it. He rested his head against the wooden post and closed his eyes. If death came tonight, he had nothing left to hold on to. The wind rose, wild and furious, kicking dust into the air. The sky darkened, a storm was coming. Grant dragged himself inside the house. He bolted the door, but the wind shook it so violently that the hinges could snap at any moment. In the swirling panic of wind and shadows, a knocking struck the door. 3 knocks. Heavy, relentless. Grant grabbed his old revolver, but his hands trembled too much to even pull the trigger. He opened the door, the wind blasted his face and pushed him back a step. In the storm-dark chaos outside, 3 figures stood there. No masks, no fear, eyes burning with the fierce fire of the mountain wild. The one in the middle stepped forward and spoke his name perfectly. Grant McCade. That voice, the same tone from 18 years ago, only deeper, stronger. Grant gasped for air, coughing hard, but before he could speak, she placed her hand on his chest right where his fading heartbeat struggled. "You gave us part of your life to save ours. Now it is our turn to save what is left of yours." Grant stared at them, unsure if they were real or ghosts, memory or flesh. But the warmth of the hand pressed to his chest was no illusion. The night storm roared behind them, and before Grant, the destiny he once planted in the barren desert had returned to claim him in the form of 3 powerful Apache women. Grant stood unsteady at the doorway, while the 3 women stepped into the cabin as if they had always belonged there. The storm howled outside. Inside, they lit a fire. Grant sat gasping for breath in his chair, clutching his chest. The woman in the center gave a quiet signal to her 2 sisters. One went to the stove, filled a pot with water, and dropped in a handful of strong scented herbs. The other took a clean cloth and gently wiped the sweat and dirt from Grant's face. He looked at them, dazed. "You really came back?" The eldest knelt beside him. Her hand rested on his shoulder, firmer than he remembered. "We made a promise. An Apache child might forget the way home, but never the one who saved her life." Grant wanted to smile, but a violent cough tore through his chest, dropping him forward onto the table. Blood bloomed across his handkerchief. He had faced that pain alone for so long. But now, a hand pressed to his back. A hand braced his chest. A warm bowl of water touched gently to his lips. And for the first time in years, he felt alive. They told him their names. Saya the eldest, Tika the one in the middle, Nira the youngest, quiet, but with eyes full of compassion. They shared their story. After Grant gave them food, another Apache group had found and taken them in. They grew up in the shadows of war, carrying a vow. One day, when they were strong enough, they would go find the man who gave them their first chance at life. Tika placed a bowl of porridge into Grant's hands. It took us 5 years just to learn who that 20-year-old cowboy was. Then 13 more to find this place. Grant was speechless. The night passed under the quiet breath of 3 Apache women caring for a cowboy on the edge of silence. They tucked more pillows behind him, stacked wood by the fire, sealed the door against the wind. At one point, Grant awoke to the sound of soft laughter. It had been years since laughter had echoed in his home. Saya touched his shoulder. "We know this illness, and we know how to fight it." Grant looked into their faces, strange, yet familiar, like a dream he had once forgotten. He reached for Saya's hand, his voice breaking. "I have lived too long in silence. Thank you for speaking to me." Saya answered gently, "We are not just speaking to you. We are staying with you." Outside, the storm roared like it meant to erase every trace of man. But inside that little cabin, 3 flames had been lit in place of a cowboy's fading heart. And that night, Grant McCade understood something clearer than ever. Sometimes, kindness does not just save others in the past. It comes back to save your own life in the future. The first morning with them in Grant's life after nearly 2 decades of solitude began with a sound he had long forgotten. The buzzing of a saw, the pounding of a hammer, and women laughing under the early sunlight. Grant braced himself against the doorway, taking shaky steps, trying to understand what was happening. 2 of the women were up on the roof, replacing rotted wooden boards. The other had built an outdoor stove in the yard and was cooking thick porridge from things they had gathered after the storm. "What are you doing?" His voice was weak, but full of wonder. Saya, without pausing her work, replied as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "We are fixing the house." Grant let out a faint laugh, a strange sound that even surprised himself. By noon, they brought a small handful of seeds to the land behind the cabin. "This used to be a garden, right?" Nira asked. Grant nodded. His eyes fell on the cracked, dry earth that had once thrived when his wife was alive. For years, there had been no one to plant again, and no reason to do so. Tika placed a hoe into his hands. "Well, now you do." Grant looked at the handle in his grip. For the first time in years, he did not want to give up on this life. Together, they tilled the soil, placed seeds, and watered the ground. The sun slowly set, and the 3 women still wore smiles, as if the land itself was being revived by their hands. That evening, they sat together around the table. The bowl of hot porridge was fragrant. Fingers brushed fingers as the spoon was passed. Warmth spread through the cabin. Grant watched each of their faces strong, free, determined. It felt as if he was finally seeing the family fate had once taken from him. He spoke up. "I do not understand why you are doing all of this." "Because you once gave us a reason to live," Saya answered, cutting gently into his sentence. A simple reply, but enough to fill nearly 20 years of emptiness. Late at night, Grant woke to soft footsteps. He saw Nira tending the fire, carefully placing a folded mat at the foot of his bed, afraid the chill would reach his lungs as the wind picked up. She did not look at him, only whispered like the breeze. "You do not abandon someone you are grateful for." Grant lay there, clutching the blanket. And for the first time in many years, he cried. In that warm darkness, with firelight and the scent of healing herbs in the air, Grant understood. It was not the storm that had brought them here. It was a small promise of kindness that had led them back. "I am truly grateful for your presence here. And if this story brought back something in you, memories of red dust afternoons and the sound of horse hooves echoing in your chest, then subscribe to my channel. So each day, we can sit together again. And I will tell you another story from the West. Rumors in this land traveled faster than any war horse. All it took was one person seeing 3 Apache women inside Grant McCade's home, and by the next day, the whole town of Bitter Dust Gulch knew. and they did not approve. That morning, Grant was still trying to walk a few steps around the yard. Tika had to hold his arm, each step a battle against his breath and the sharp pain in his lungs. Then came the sound of hooves at the gate. Deputy Carl Dawson, known for his crooked nose and deep-rooted hate, pulled his reins and stopped right in front of them. He jerked his chin, speaking with thinly veiled contempt. "Grant, I heard you got tribal trash living in your house." Tika immediately stepped forward, placing herself between Grant and the deputy. Nira walked out from the house, her hands still covered in soil from watering the plants. Saya stood on the porch, one hand resting lightly on the long knife at her hip. The deputy squinted. "Let me make this simple. Do those folks have permission to be here?" Grant braced himself on the fence post, breath ragged, but his voice was solid as stone. "This is my home. Who stays here is up to me." Dawson laughed sharp and mocking. "Look at you, McCade. How much longer you think you got? When you die, I will run them off like the stray dogs they are." Grant clenched his jaw. From a distance, townsfolk looked on, some chuckling behind their hands. Saya slowly stepped down from the porch, her eyes like sharpened arrows. "We will stand in his place, and we will not let him fall." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "Good. I will remember that." He turned his horse to leave, but before he rode off, he raised his voice so the entire ranch could hear. "Do not forget, around here, justice belongs to white men. Apache do not get to dream of having a home." Grant's breath grew heavy. His vision darkened from a mix of anger and helplessness. Saya guided him back inside. He slammed his hand on the table, voice cracking. "I have brought trouble down on you." Saya shook her head. "No, they are the trouble. We are not afraid of people who have never understood. What makes someone truly human?" Tika placed a hand on his back. "They want you to believe you are worthless. Do not let them win." Nira sat beside him, whispering like a vow. "We have lived because of a promise, and now we live to protect that promise." Grant looked at the three women standing before him, strong, unshaken, willing to face down the whole world to keep their word. In that moment, he knew they were not just the people he once saved. They were his shield, his family, and his reason to keep breathing. Outside, townsfolk were beginning to gather, whispering, pointing at the cabin, but in the firelit glow of the setting sun, Grant stood in the doorway, the three Apache sisters at his side. 4 souls, a tiny outpost standing against the weight of an entire town's prejudice. That little cabin slowly became its own world, a place where every heartbeat had meaning. None of them ever spoke the word love, but all of them were living for it. Grant practiced standing every morning. Tika was always behind him, keeping his balance, but never holding him too much. "You have to remember your legs still have strength." Nira woke early to cook the softest meals, always finding ways to help him swallow easily. She rarely spoke, but the porridge was always the perfect temperature, never too thick, never too thin. Saya, she kept her eyes, or more truthfully, her heart's gaze on everything dangerous near the cabin. Every night, she would patrol the area, knife strapped to her thigh, moving with the silence of a wildcat. Grant did not know what to say except the same 2 words, over and over: "Thank you." But Saya would only ever reply with one simple line: "Just keep living." On windless nights, the 3 sisters often sat on the porch, mending nets, fixing clothes, or brushing the horses. Grant would place a chair nearby, listening to their laughter mixed with the crackle of the fire. Once, he coughed hard and dropped to his knees. Nira was the first to reach him, catching him in arms that were cold but firm. "Do not try to do this alone." Grant's chest tightened, not from illness, but from something deeper. He gave a faint, aching smile. "I have been alone for too long. You will get used to it," Tika said softly, her eyes full of warmth. That sentence, it sounded like a quiet decision, as if those 3 hearts had already chosen to never leave him again. Another night, the rain poured down hard. Grant burned with fever, heat radiating off him like fire. Saya sat close beside his bed, wiping his sweat little by little. In a haze, he muttered through the fever, I do not deserve anyone." Saya stopped. She placed her hand on his chest, right over the spot where his heart beat the strongest. "You once saved 3 girls waiting to die in the sand. Think about it. If you did not deserve anyone, we would never have come back." Grant opened his eyes. He did not see the sky, only 3 faces leaning close, shining like stars in the storm of his life. He whispered, "Do not leave again." Tika answered instantly, "We came here, so where else would we go?" Nira pulled the blanket up, sealing the moment like a quiet vow. After that, no one locked the cabin door again. Every morning there were 4 portions set on the table. The 3 chairs always sat a little closer together. And every night, there were 4 breaths blending together inside the house that had once been terrifyingly silent. But every touch, every glance, every breath held in his chest was a promise more sacred than any ritual. And Grant understood. This was real love. That spring came like a miracle tree sprouting green even as the red earth stayed dry. And on that small ranch, 3 Apache sisters and 1 cowboy had turned ruin into life. After every rain, Nira led a brood of newly hatched chicks into the backyard, her hands moving as if laying hope gently onto the ground. Tika built a new sheep pen with her own hands and repaired every rotten fence post. Saya oversaw everything, eyes sharp like a hawk's, always scanning for signs of danger. Grant watched them from the porch, his hands still trembling from illness. But the smile had returned to his face. He tried to take part however he could, holding the hammer to secure a wooden plank, pulling weeds with slow but determined steps, relearning how to ride. Even though his lungs burned with every breath, and every time he stumbled there were always 3 hands ready to catch him. No words, just lifting him up and walking forward together. In town, things began to change too. At first, folks would spit on the ground when they saw them ride in to buy supplies. But then, one day, the blacksmith's son was kicked by a horse and knocked unconscious. Saya, who happened to be nearby, dropped to her knees and performed chest compressions and breath after breath until the boy cried out again. His mother held him close, tears flooding her face. "Thank you. I owe you his life." That sentence spread faster than any rumor of hate. Tika helped the innkeeper after she slipped and broke her leg, carrying her all the way home. Nira shared seeds and herbal medicine with those who could not afford any. Those who once looked at them with nothing but scorn were now beginning to look with gratitude. Back at the ranch, a place once silent like a graveyard for hope, the laughter of children began to return. Town kids started creeping up to play, receiving apples and warm biscuits, learning how to shoot tiny arrows from a small bow that Tika had made just for them. The children gave them a sweet nickname, the 3 Aunties of the Valley. Grant watched from the porch, leaning against the post. Eyes welling up with tears, he did not try to stop. Before, he had no reason left to keep living. But now, he truly wanted to stay in this life, and he felt happiness simply because they were there. One evening, as the sun fell red and burning behind the distant ridge, Saya placed her hand over Grant's. "Do you see now? A home does not need tall walls. It just needs someone waiting for you to return." Grant held her hand and then 2 more hands joined. 4 people, 4 sources of warmth, forming a circle no one could break. In that moment, Grant knew without a doubt, they were no longer the starving children he once saved. They were family. The afternoon sun tilted across the freshly repaired roof of the cabin, warming the room where Grant McCade lay propped up on thick pillows, still breathing in slow, labored draws. The searing coughs had begun to ease. The pneumonia no longer threatened his life, thanks to the 3 who had never once looked away from him. Every morning, Nira was the first to step in. She would check the pot of herbal steam, then press a warm cloth to his chest, letting the vapor ease his lungs. "Breathe in, just a little deeper. Good. Your lungs are still fighting and so are we." At midday, Tika would help him walk into the yard, pushing him to take short steps so his lungs could open up in the sunlight and wind. "If you fall, we will catch you. But if you give up, we will hurt." At night, Saya always sat by his side, changing the cloth, listening to his breathing fast or slow. She never rushed him. She simply laid a hand on his shoulder, just enough for him to know, "Tomorrow, you still need to breathe with us." One calm evening, Grant stood in the doorway, looking out at the ranch that had transformed. New fences, rows of young vegetables, chickens chirping like a celebration of new life. He whispered, "All of this is because of me, Saya nodded, because you are still a part of this world." Grant leaned on the fence, looking down at legs that still trembled but no longer with despair. He had once laid waiting to die. Now they were making him live. Nira stepped forward and placed in his hand the same cloth he had once used to shield them from the wind so long ago, 18 years ago. You saved 3 Apache girls dying in the dust. Tika continued, her voice woven with hope. 18 years later, it is our turn to save you from the dust of loneliness. Saya pressed her forehead to his chest, where his fragile heartbeat fluttered. You once gave us your life. Now we will live to give it back to you. Grant could not hold it in any longer. He pulled all 3 into his thin, warm arms. You are the reason I still breathe each day. The blazing sunset touched the 4 of them, standing close as one. There was no law that taught them to love, no system that recognized them. But inside that tiny cabin at the end of the valley, 3 steady flames held up one fragile breath so it would not fade again. And if you asked Grant McCade who his family was, he would answer without hesitation, my family is the 3 women who chose to stay. You see, Grant once thought he was just leftover breath in a dying desert, forgotten by the world. But the kindness he planted long ago had grown into 3 wildflowers fierce with freedom, strong with love. They did not share blood. They did not need papers or law. They only needed one thing, to choose each other every single day. And maybe that is the only kind of miracle that ever truly saves a life. It has been an honor to share this journey with you. I sincerely hope that wherever you are safe and you are loved. I love you, my dear audience of Wild West storytelling. Now tell me, what did you feel listening to this story? Leave a comment down below. Press 1 if this story touched your heart. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful tales from the Wild West.